Jordan Rains here with the IDP 411 podcast. Just want to tell you guys today about our sponsor of the show, expandtheboxscore.com. Expandtheboxscore.com has premium NFL and college football stats. They're adaptable, they're affordable, there's all kinds of great stuff on there from the NFL to college football. It's great for people that are in the Devy leagues looking to get that edge over their league mates. So go check out expandtheboxscore.com, proud sponsor of the show. And now without further ado, on to the IDP 411.
What's up? This is Jared Gray with my co-host Jordan Rains and special guest Dennis Bennett, the At Culture Coach for the IDP 411 today. We're going to cover the AFC North. What's up, gentlemen? How are you doing?
Well, I've not been called special very frequently, so I'm doing great.
You're very special to us, Dennis. You're one of our favorite people to interact with on Twitter, and we had one of our better shows last year when we were a shit show with you. So we are happy to have you on under better circumstances this year to talk about everybody's favorite division.
I'm excited to be here, and if I'm not talking about the Lions, I'd rather talk about the Browns. So.
Yes, sir. And that's not a bad place to start.
Let's go.
Yeah, this is all going to be a whole series, guys. IDP Army, just to let you know, we're going to do all the divisions, and we're going to have a guest on for every division, which is kind of different for us. But we figured we'd start at the very top with Dennis, and then we'll just work our way backwards. And we're going to start with the Browns. And for me, the most interesting situation with the Browns is this linebacker situation. Who do you want to own in this Browns linebacker field? We got Mack Wilson, Sione Takitaki, both were drafted last year. Then they took the guy from LSU this year, was named Jordan Phillips. Jared, you just had your one of your IDP rookie 411s over him the other day. Maybe you could start us out commenting on what to expect or think about him, and then we can talk about who or what we want to own going forward in 2020.
Well, I don't have him as I don't have him on my list of top 25 just because I think they're so young right now with having Mack Wilson. And I had Mack Wilson last year in my top 25 rookie IDP 411s in Dynasty because I think that he can be a type of player that can do that. I love Sione Takitaki. I think he's a very under-the-radar guy. I think he moves to middle linebacker. I like Phillips, but he never really emerged as a player to break out at LSU. And maybe that was because of players around him, because Phillips was a top-tier athlete coming out of high school. So, I don't know. In my opinion, we'll see what happens. And like you said, who knows what's going to happen with those guys. But I'm kind of – Sione Takitaki's climbing my list, to be honest with you. What about you guys?
What do you think, Dennis?
Well, I feel like Mack Wilson is the safe play.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be on there. Of the three of them, he's probably the one that's going to rush the passer if they need one, I would guess. Takitaki in the middle is your sideline to sideline guy. And Phillips on the strong side, he's going to be headed out with the tight end and engaged with the tight end. So that leaves Wilson to do the job. And what did he put up? 82 tackles last year with 57 solos.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me, that sort of puts him as the safe play. But I do like, if Takitaki is there in the middle and he's going to be out there all three downs, he does have that same potential as Wilson to maybe rack up more tackle numbers, whereas Wilson might have to offset some of the productivity with 3 or 4 sacks or something like that.
Yeah, I see what you guys are saying there, and it just kind of shows you the nebulous nature of it because we were so used to that core the last few years with Schobert and Kirksey kind of holding everything down. You kind of were aware of where they would be and what they would be doing, and then Kirksey got hurt at the very beginning of last year, and they threw Mack Wilson out there, and a lot of people had high hopes for Mack Wilson last year. And I mean, he was playable linebacker. Don't get me wrong. I had him in several leagues as he was a 3 or a 4, but a lot of people the hype, I don't know if you guys remember last summer, but the hype on him was kind of like he might be one of the best linebackers in this class to produce. And he produced, yes, but it wasn't because on merit. It was more of a situational thing. So he's got his work cut out for him, in my opinion. He's going to get the work, though. So I think I agree with you, Dennis and Jared. I think that he's going to be the one you want to own because he's the safe play. But I will be honest, I've got just as much Sione Takitaki on my benches in my leagues as I do Mack Wilson, maybe even a little more, just because he's been the cheaper option to get the past couple of years. And the crazy thing about the Browns linebackers is, I mean, they have such a history of productivity. You can go back to like 2016, every year the past 3 or 4 years, either Joe Schober or Christian Kirksey has been a top 8 guy. And there was a year where they were both in the top 10 there for a second. So I think that there's productivity here for your rosters, no matter who it is. It's kind of a pick your poison. I like Sione Takitaki. I think he's got a little bit of a cooler name. Mack Wilson's not a bad name, though. And if you watch his tape or watch some of his highlights, Sione Takitaki, I mean, he's vicious. Like, he's the kind of player that I like watching play football. Not a lot of finesse. I mean, he's a wrecker. He puts his helmet down and he goes in for the tackle. And I know, where's he from? He was BYU, right?
I think so, yeah.
He, for his first year there, he played defensive end, so he's got a little pass rushing acumen as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do overall with that squad. But I think it would be wise to get one of them on your team, especially at cost right now. They're fairly cheap.
Yeah, I think if I'm looking at the cost, then I'm probably going to go Takitaki. But it comes down to what's your risk tolerance. Mm-hmm. And for me, Wilson has a little bit better floor. Takitaki, I think he might struggle with consistency on a game-to-game basis. But I could easily see a scenario where at the end of the year you're looking back and saying, well, you know, Takitaki 2 or 3 rounds after Wilson put up as good of or better numbers than Mack Wilson. It's definitely not out of the range of outcomes.
Amen.
No, for sure.
I had a little question here for both of you guys. What is your highest you would take either of these guys? Just, if you're in a redraft league, what linebacker number are you looking at to draft a Mack Wilson? Linebacker 20, linebacker 30? And then same question in Dynasty. Let's go.
I'm kind of just where you said it. Probably right around linebacker 30 for me. Linebacker can be really deep, depending on, you know, if you're getting if you got 3 top 5 guys, I can risk it and go later for sure. You know, we talk about defensive linemen being a very non-deep class in general, and if you get a top 5 guy, you can risk it, go and get a lower tier linebacker, and one of these guys is going to be good. Both of them might be good, and Jacob Phillips might set a new standard for us when we're wrong. But I'm definitely not jumping to go get one of these guys personally.
Yeah. What about you, Dennis?
I think because I can tell you I put up on waivers the other day in a dynasty league. So.
Yeah, I think the challenge in taking your IDPs is that who are you playing with? What's your league? What is your league going to do? So I could just as easily see taking Mack Wilson at linebacker, 28 to 32, because I'm in a league with guys like you who value them. And then I have a lot of other leagues where there are guys that are going to draft literally 17 out of their 20 offensive players before they even look at a defensive player. And then linebacker is like the wide receiver of the defense. It lacks the position scarcity. So I'm probably looking at defensive line earlier. And so getting Mack Wilson or Sione Takitaki in those later rounds, and as linebacker 30 at linebacker, if I'm picking linebacker 30, chances are, unless we have to start 3, I might not even be picking him as a starter. And the same, and Takitaki going later than that, probably the same. So I think that I don't think I'm going to reach on him up past earlier than say linebacker 20-25. But if he's sitting there at linebacker 30, and I'm looking at my linebacker 3, and what's my team look like? If I feel comfortable with my defensive line, because that's probably the position that has the highest amount of scarcity, especially if you're in if you have to start a defensive tackle. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure you get a good, solid defensive tackle rotation. So, that's the area where I'd be looking at is 30 to 40 for those guys.
Nice. I agree with you guys straight on. They're starting linebackers or assumed starting linebackers, and that's great. But I'm not going to reach for them over guys that are known commodities to me, like a Levante David or a Jayon Brown, even Rashaan Evans. I would rather have over Mack Wilson. So yeah, I think deep into that 30 area as maybe my linebacker 3. I like both of them. So let's move on past the linebackers. Let's talk about the defensive MVP of 2020. I'm speaking it into existence right now. Myles Garrett, guy played most of last season. He played 10 games, but we all know what happened. Things got a little testy on Thursday Night Football with the Steelers, and he got himself in some trouble. And he left the season at Week 10 with 10 sacks, 30 tackles, 18 quarterback hits. So he's basically getting 2 quarterback hits a game and 11 tackles for loss, which 11 tackles for loss last year in 10 games is only one less than he had in 16 games in 18. So he was on his way to easily his best season of his career. What do you guys think? I mean, he's a lock top 3 defensive lineman for me. I'm assuming you guys are in the same camp, maybe?
Oh, yeah, I'm rolling. If I can grab Myles Garrett, especially in leagues, the first league that I've played with your IDP 1, 2, 3 scoring is I'm currently filling it. We're doing a 14 team with 7 IDP players that you're in, and we're going to use your IDP 1, 2, 3 scoring. So trying to figure out what that new standard is and how that's looking at the scoring and what that's going to do for someone like Myles Garrett. The hard part with the rusher is, do they get tackles? I recently did an all-time fantasy football draft with John Lobb, and as I was looking at my defensive linemen, I initially went to Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney, because they were just great pass rushers. Mm-hmm. But there wasn't a ton of bonuses for sacks, and when you looked at their tackle numbers year over year, they just didn't make many tackles. It was sacks, it was quarterback pressures, but not many tackles. And so finding that balance, I'd love to see him hit 40, 50, 55 tackles to go along with, 16 sacks and 25 quarterback hits. Mm-hmm. If he has a season like that, then he is looking at the defensive MVP. I mean, the guy is a monster.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that because he tried to take off Mason Rudolph's head.
No, he's actually a hero for doing that. The Steelers fans everywhere were happy to see Mason being escorted off the field. Get him out of here. What do you think, Jared? Top 3? Oh, he's taking a drink. Sorry, y'all.
Without a doubt. I think it's kind of standard for me. Danielle Hunter, Myles Garrett, Joey Bosa are my top 3 in no particular order, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. His quarterback hits alone are scary, yeah. And then you go on the fact that he always seems to be in the backfield. I mean, he might cause a few penalties being offsides, which the one thing that he needs to work on. If he could figure that out, he could be scary for the rest of his career. Mm-hmm. He's kind of what they expected out of Von Miller his entire career. And that's what he is right now, and I continue to expect him to be.
Nice. Yeah, I'm with you guys. Dennis, especially I would like to see his tackles get up past 60. I mean, when you look at an elite defensive lineman like Joey Bosa, for instance, or you look at Danielle Hunter, both those guys are pushing towards 60, 65, 70, and that really can save your ass if they do hit a 9 or a 10 sack season instead of a 12 to 14 sack season. So, hopefully Garrett does get his tackle numbers up a little bit. In 18, he had 44 in 16 games. So that's good. That's not great. That's good. So if he can push up a little bit, which I think he can, I think he could really push into that top 3. So Myles Garrett, everyone, go draft him if you can. The discount time is over. I was getting him early this offseason, January, February, because he was still like in that nebulous area. I mean, you could get him as the 8th or 9th defensive lineman off the board. Those days are gone, though. So I'm glad I got him on a couple of teams at that price. Yeah. What do you guys think about, in my opinion, the most underrated defensive player on the Browns is Larry Ogunjobi. He had a really solid season for me last year on a couple of teams. I took him in some defensive tackle leagues. He had 50 tackles. He had 50 the season before, 5.5 sacks the last 2 years. He's just very consistent for a young defensive tackle, and he's playing next to other, known commodities, Myles Garrett, Sheldon Richardson. What do you guys think about Larry Ogunjobi as far as upside compared to, let's say, his stablemate Richardson?
I mean, I like Larry Ogunjobi. For me,
I know you're a Richardson.
Sheldon Richardson's the other guy to grab for me.
Mm-hmm.
I blew up Sheldon Richardson all year last year. I had him on like 4 teams last year. I actually dropped. This is no kid lasted for it. I dropped Nick Bosa in a league for Sheldon Richardson and got blasted for it. But it wasn't. It was a dynasty league, but it was the last year of our dynasty league. So for me, it wasn't a loss at all to me. I mean, I got 66 tackles and 3 sacks out of the guy. So, and I got 15 quarterback hits in the backfield. So, I mean, most of those tackles were tackles for loss. So, for me, I love Sheldon Richardson. I think Larry Ogunjobi is consistent. As you said, he's 50 tackles last 2 seasons. I think Olivia Vernon's going to be out the door when it's all said and done. I think they overpaid for him. I said that, from the beginning. But anytime you can get a player of those 3 guys, Larry Ogunjobi, Sheldon Richardson, and Myles Garrett, they're going to be scary, dude. I mean,
yeah.
Which makes me like Delpit even more.
What do you think, Dennis, about these 2 big boys in the middle?
Well, I think that Cleveland has the makings for quite the defensive line. I know they brought in Claiborne to back up Vernon, and I think that's going to make for a really – if they keep Vernon, it's going to make for a really solid team at that end with Garrett on the other. And then when I looked at Ogunjobi had 50 tackles, Richardson 62. Richardson is, to me, I think is a better athlete, and the numbers kind of bear that out with the higher sack numbers, higher quarterback hits. So Ogunjobi is going to have to make it up, I think, by improving his tackle numbers if he wants to start getting drafted over Richardson. Mm-hmm. But if he does that, that could make him a real value. I have a league that I have balanced IDP scoring, and so defensive tackles get 4 points for a quarterback hit, or 4 points for a tackle. And Ogunjobi finished just 1 point behind Aaron Donald in that league. Scored, let's see, he was right around defensive tackle 12. So it was, Richardson was defensive tackle 5. So Ogunjobi scored 184 points and Richardson 234 points. So getting into the starting lineup, getting that uptick in snaps, I think is really going to help Ogunjobi. I think if you can get him a round or 2 after Richardson, I think you might be getting a steal.
Yeah, I've been getting him in many drafts as my defensive lineman, like 7 or 8. And I don't want to say I'm falling in love with him, but he's a guy that I'm slowly just falling in love with. I mean, you look at the consistency, 5.5 sacks, 50 tackles. That's great for a guy to have on your bench. I mean, to think that it's not a non-defensive tackle, you don't have to start one league. To have Larry Ogunjobi at any point able to plug him into your lineup and know that you're going to get probably at least 3 solo tackles out of him, maybe a sack, but just knowing the disruption that happens around him, he's a player that, and he's 25, it's the difference. Him and Sheldon Richardson, there's a 5-year age gap difference there. So, if you're going dynasty, you want to err on the side of youth, and Ogunjobi's been nothing but good since he's been in the league. So, I think there's value for both of them, and I like Ogunjobi more than some. So, quickly, I just want to touch on the Jadeveon Clowney rumors. Would that really excite you guys any if he went there, or how would you feel about that? We're Dennis, just so you know, we're kind of notoriously lower on Clowney than a lot of people, just because he hasn't really ever shown that he can produce elite like his draft capital was when he came into the league. People keep holding out hope, but
I think people.
I think that defensive line is so elite. He would
be productive there.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think people have. He's going into his 6th year now,
6 or 7.
Draft capital doesn't matter anymore.
Yep.
And so you have to look at who he is as a player. What kind of production is he getting, and value him based on that. Stop valuing him based on being a early 1st-round pick,
a prospect.
It's time to say, well, we know for one, he's not an elite pass rusher. Stop counting on. Don't value him based on the sacks he's going to get. Mm-hmm. He's a solid run defender, and so play him in when you draft and when you value him as a non-pass rushing defensive end. And if you do that, then you're probably never going to have him on your team, because you're going to have people that still say, "Oh, it's Jadeveon Clowney. It's all the name." Mm-hmm. And that's okay. I think if he goes to Cleveland, I think he'd be an upgrade over the production that Vernon is given, and I could probably pull off a half a dozen sacks playing across from Myles Garrett and next to Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi. So I spent my 20s pursuing a music career, and I used to tell people that if I was the ugliest guy in the band and the worst musician in the band, then we were pretty good looking, and we had and we were a pretty talented band. And I think if Clowney goes to Cleveland and he's the worst guy on that defensive line, they've got a pretty good defensive line then.
Amen. I like it.
Yeah, that'll be pretty stout for sure.
Yeah, if apparently they have the biggest offer on the table.
I don't think he's going to Cleveland, because I think he's trying to use him as leverage, and because when it comes out that they've offered him the most money and he still said no, and he's not really getting great offers anywhere else, that tells you all you need to know about his view on going to Cleveland. I could be wrong, but I expect that he's going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree. I'm
probably not a smart.
I think he goes to the Titans.
Ooh, I would like that. I mean, I don't like him on many teams, but I could really get behind the Titans. So, all right, well, let's we spent a lot of time talking about the Browns. We still haven't even talked about the safeties, so let's real quick touch on Delpit and Carl Joseph. What do you guys think about these two? This year, the Brown safeties weren't really very useful last year, but is that going to be something that we can maybe think differently about this year? I'm inclined to say yes, that they'll both be usable, but I'm not really prepared to stick them into my top 30 of my rankings yet. But what do you guys think? Just real quick.
I think both are usable in the aspect that I love Delpit. So
I don't know. I think for me, there's some health issues that seem to crop up every year with Joseph, and that leads to inconsistency there. And while I like Delpit somewhat as a ball hawk, is he going to be able to produce enough turnovers given his reputation not being a great tackler? I'm sure Jared could probably, since he loves him, he can probably debunk that not a great tackler. But not having dug too deep into him, I feel like the opportunity is going to be there. Will he do anything with it? It's hard as a rookie. You have to learn a lot about the NFL defenses and how the offenses prepare. It could happen. I think if Joseph stays healthy, he could produce. If he plays strong safety, I think he could produce reliable numbers, if not spectacular numbers.
Nice. Yep. Jared, any final
I
comments?
like him. Like I said, I think you'll see Del Pitts in my rookie IDP 1 top 25. He's coming up really soon, so I'll just wait for you to hear that.
Right on.
Awesome. All right, well, let's move on to the Bengals. Newly minted fresh quarterback, newly minted linebacker core, a nice new wide receiver over there, but let's stick to the defensive player. So this is really, again, it's going to be about the linebackers. We have, Jermaine Pratt, we have Wilson coming in, Logan Wilson, and then they also drafted Akeem Gaithers-David. These are kind of the three guys that the world is kind of trying to figure out who is going to be the guy there. It's kind of two scenarios where one is Jermaine Pratt is the tackle leader and one where Logan Wilson is the tackle leader. I think Gaithers-David is going to be that third linebacker in all scenarios, at least this first year. And they might even play him some strong safety from what I've been reading. But what are your guys' thoughts on this linebacker core just overall, just real quick? Let's go with Jared first. What are you thinking?
So I think the biggest reason why Pratt is climbing boards instead of Wilson is because of the training camp maybe starting later or whatnot. Wilson is, and I don't want to give too much away from IDP 4-1 rookie guy, but he's a top 10 guy, I think possibly. I think Akeem Davis-Gaither is the best athlete in the entire group of those three. And I think Jermaine Pratt is the guy that knows the playbook. So I'm not jumping to get any of the three statistic-wise, even though you have Hubbard and Dunlap in front of them. I think Wilson, in the dynasty aspect, is the grab. I think he reminds me a lot of Leighton Vander Esch, and being a small school kid that gets a ton of tackles and has a great motor. So for me, I love Wilson personally.
Nice.
That's just me, though.
What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with Jared on the playbook aspect of it. With this abbreviated off season, it is going to be a challenge for some players to get the reps. I mentioned before we started, my 15-year-old has taken up the guitar since Christmas, and one of the questions he asks me frequently is, "Well, how can I do this?" And my answer is consistently, practice. You have to get the muscle memory, and playing linebacker is the same thing, or playing any position in the NFL. You're new until you're not new, and so not getting those practice reps and not being able to go through those OTAs, as hard as people study film, as much time as they put into it, you've got to create that muscle memory and you've got to create that reaction. And without the training camp, I think that puts Wilson a little bit behind the 8 ball there. And so Pratt starts out. I could definitely see a scenario where Pratt starts the first 8 or 9 games and then he ends up on the bench for Wilson the second half of the season, and they end up with similar numbers. But because Wilson didn't get that time in early, it takes him time, and Pratt will play. He'll be serviceable. He'll do okay. He might not be a superstar. So that's what'll end up with the Bengals making the switch to the younger guy, the newer guy. It will be that he starts to produce because he gets that muscle memory. He starts to get those reps. He starts reacting instead of thinking.
Nice. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with both of you. Right now, when I was doing my original projections, I had Logan Wilson ahead in my tackle numbers, but I went back and looked, and I've kind of flip-flopped that just because, he only started 9 games last year, but he had 50 solos. I'm talking Pratt right now, and that's pretty dang good. He didn't do anything else really, no pass deflections, no forced fumbles, all that, but 50 solo tackles in 9 games started is, that if you extrapolate that out, that is good. So, and we haven't seen Logan Wilson do it at that level yet. So I'm inclined to agree with you guys. I think Pratt might be the safer choice, but I think the upside play is Logan Wilson. And then Gaithers-Davis, I like him a lot. I just need to see what they end up doing with him. So let's move to the
Akeem Davis-Gaither is real. So
Yeah, no, he's a hitter.
We'll
He's
see.
fast. He kind of reminds me of Devin Bush, so I'd like to see him out there racking up some numbers. But let's talk about these defensive linemen. So last year, Sam Hubbard and Carlos Dunlap both finished in the top 12 at an IDP 1-2-3 scoring at defensive linemen. And, when you look at Carlos Dunlap, he's 31 years old. He'll be 31 years old this year, which to me is an age, it's called age discount. I mean, I think once guys hit 30, you can get them cheaper. But Carlos Dunlap's been so consistent throughout his career. And, I mean, he's really kind of ramped it up the past couple of years. He's getting tons of pass deflections, which is something I like to see as far as like extras from my defensive linemen. I mean, in 2016, he had 15, 7 and 17, 8 and 8 the past 2 years. I mean, that's pretty dang good. There are middle linebackers that don't have that many pass deflections. He consistently is getting you basically 8 sacks a year. I mean, the guy's got 81.5 sacks since 2010. He's one of the leaders on the sack leaderboard. He's pretty high. And this last year, he got 63 tackles. So I think I actually was just looking. I don't want to say this out loud. I don't know who's watching, but I was actually just browsing one of my waivers this morning, and I saw Carlos Dunlap on the waivers. So I'm going to be making a move later to go get him. But then you have Sam Hubbard, who has been coming on strong. He was one of our sleepers last year. Jared and I talked about him a lot. And we said, look out. I mean, in the very minimal snaps he played in 18 with no game started, I mean, he still had 40 tackles, which was, I think, even more than Chris Jones had last year, who was a top 5 defensive lineman. And, Sam Hubbard got a full 15 and he delivered. I mean, he went out and delivered. Maybe it wasn't a big sack season, but it was big numbers for your IDP team and consistent because they came in the form of tackles. So do you guys think they both have that kind of upside?
Well, Dunlap had such a huge...
Come again?
I mean, Dunlap had such a huge end of the season. I mean, week 10 through 17 I mean, he went 15, 24, 55, 19, 29, 13, 45. I mean, that's the kind of points he put up in that league. So that's ridiculous, dude.
Yeah, I mean, he's
slept. I mean, and he did do nothing before that.
Yeah, but it shows you.
Week one, he had 25 points in that weekend, but after that, he had 13 points, 7 and 8.
Yeah, it just shows you
4 games where he didn't get a zing.
Defensive linemen are so boom or bust. I mean, Chandler Jones had a couple of weeks last year under 5 points, but he also had like 2 weeks over 50. So, I mean, if the sacks fall your way, you can go the right way. But do you guys think they both have top 15 upside in 2020? That's my main question for you guys. The young up-and-comer and then the aging vet.
I think they have the upside.
I love him.
Yeah, the upside is there, but I do think that there is a legitimate concern about Dunlap falling off as he gets older. He started 14 games last year, and he had I'm curious if there's ever been any studies done when you look at the correlation of sacks and quarterback hits. So Dunlap had 21 quarterback hits last year, and Hubbard only had 13, and there was a half a sack difference in them. So is the disparity in quarterback hits because Dunlap, he's losing a step, he's getting older, and he's not getting there? Whereas if it was 5 years ago, those 21 quarterback hits would have turned into, 8 quarterback hits and 17 or 18 sacks instead of 9 sacks.
Yeah, I've looked a little bit at it, and I haven't done a deep study. I'm not a super spreadsheet kind of guy. I have a little bit of trouble with the columns and all that, maybe it's because I'm a little dyslexic. But I think there is some correlation, and you point out something good. I mean, Hubbard was able to convert, over half of his quarterback hits into sacks. I don't think that's necessarily a repeatable thing, but I could easily see his quarterback hits going up too. I mean, it was his first year as a starter. I mean, for all intents and purposes, he was, it was his first year in that starting role, and he probably got a lot of attention on him, because it's him and Dunlap and their middle guys. Like Geno Atkins kind of had a downish kind of year last year. So Hubbard was having some trouble in the games I watched getting to the quarterback. He was often facing 2 or 3 guys. And I mean, I love Hubbard. He's not an elite pass rusher. I'll just say it out loud. He's good. But he was, when he gets double, triple teamed, he's not able to just work his way through there like hopefully Chase Young or someone else out of Ohio State like Nick Bosa is able to. So I like them both coming into this year. I think we have to temper our expectations, but I don't think 8 sacks, 9 sacks is out of the realm of possibilities for both of them. It's really going to come down to the extras with those guys, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could see their production flipping a little bit when it comes to the sacks and the hits. I could see Hubbard moving up, from 8.5 sacks to 10 or 12 sacks, and Dunlap dropping from 9 to 7. Mm-hmm. And part of it could be, Zach Taylor comes in. He's going into his second year. A lot of the younger coaches now, they look at a lot more rotational type of systems. And so when you're looking at a 32-year-old, 32-year-old defensive lineman, it wouldn't surprise me if he gets a 10 or 15% drop in snaps to keep him fresh. And if that happens, that's going to impact productivity. It may keep the productivity flat with fewer snaps because keeping him fresh works, but it may also just completely limit the opportunity to the point where it doesn't matter how fresh he is, he's just not getting enough opportunity to take a step forward from the numbers from last year.
Yeah. Yep. Well, there's going to be production there for sure. And, I don't think you can go wrong taking either. I've seen Hubbard going a little higher than he probably should, considering he has a limited sack ceiling right now. But I'm fine, especially in Dynasty, getting a hold of him. So what about these defensive backs? I know, Jared, let's talk with you. You've been a big Jesse Bates guy. And, 100 tackles, rookie, sophomore. Are we going to just expect more of the same from Bates? And, and where do you think he should be ranked going into this next year? Start, Jared.
For me, Bates is so consistent, and Sean Williams has gotten old, and love or hate it. And I've always been on Sean Williams' bandwagon, but you bring in Von Bell for a reason. You know how much you and me have praised Von Bell the last 2 years. So Bates is consistent. He's athletic. He stays on the field, which is very important to me. I'll be honest with you. He's a top 10 guy for me. He's going to stay that way. He's a top 10 safety, and he might even be a top 5 safety. He's finished top 10 the last 2 years, rookie and sophomore season, so he didn't have a slump. I will own him in as many leagues as possible unless I have guys like John Johnson, Jamal Adams, Buda Baker, stuff like that. But Jesse Bates he's great, man. I love him personally.
Yeah, 2 years, very consistent 100 tackles. He puts up a third season like that, and you've got to start putting him in your top 5. So I agree with you. What do you think, Dennis? Are you a Jesse Bates fan? And then we'll circle back around and talk about Von Bell real quick after that. But
I am a Bates fan. Last year there were numerous scenarios where it was the Bates versus Williams debate. Who do you want in Cincinnati? And I think last year I probably was a little more weighted towards Williams. But as because I guess I typically will, if it comes down to, I think the production is equal, I frequently will go for the strong safety over the free safety, just because I'll expect the tackle numbers to be better. And last year, the tackle numbers were a little bit better, but they weren't so much better that it makes sense to fade Jesse Bates. I like them both. It'll come down to can Williams hold on to the job. Von Bell has shown that he's a pretty good defensive back. I got the chance to watch him here in Columbus play for his college career, and so naturally I'm a fan. But when players are moving teams, learning new systems, there's a reason teams let players go. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's, you're replaceable with, player X that we've taken at, a lower salary, and we're going to get the same production. So whether or not Bell can kind of come in and take the job from Williams, I don't know. He might just be brought in there to be that solid third safety and play that role.
Yeah. I'll start with
They paid him too much, I think.
Von Bell. My thing with Von Bell is he's quietly consistent, and even though the Saints kind of jerked his chain a little bit, they didn't start him, in several games his first couple of years. He's consistently been an 85+ tackle guy, even with, like I said, getting his chain jerked around a little bit. And I love Sean Williams as much as the next guy, but they did bring him in, you know what I mean? And the Saints felt like they could replace him with Malcolm Jenkins, which I don't think they can, but that's on them to decide. But I'm in the camp that both of these guys, like Sean Williams and Jesse Bates the last 2 years, not only are going to be fantasy relevant, but I think that Von Bell could push into the top 5. And the only reason I say that about Von Bell and not Bates is Von Bell, the last couple of years, well, especially this last year, I mean, he had some very big plays. He had a couple of fumble recoveries. He had a couple interceptions. I know he had how about he have 2 forced fumbles this last year, but then you go back and look at his career, he's had 2 forced fumbles every year but one. So I'm not saying he's going to do that, but he's shown himself to be that kind of a disruptor. And again, these are in seasons where he hasn't started a full 16 ever because the Saints do Saint stuff. I don't understand what they do. But he's gotten a sack every season, 2 forced fumbles every season, 2 or 3 pass deflections every year, and basically sitting right at 85 tackles a season. And to get a guy like that, and you can draft him well outside of the top 10 defensive backs most years, especially the past couple of this year, I know for sure on the drafts I've done, I like that a lot. And I think the upside's there. And we've seen Sean Williams be successful there with tackles bleeding through, and Jesse Bates. So we've loved that tandem. And I think Bell and Bates are going to be high quality assets. So any thoughts on Bell, Jared, before we move on down?
Like I said, I think Jesse Bates is the guy to own of the other 2 guys. He's been consistent, 211 tackles, 3 interceptions each season. I like Von Bell, don't get me wrong. I think he is a ball hawk, and I loved him with the Saints. And if the Bengals think what they have in Joe Burrow is Drew Brees, then I think that you love both these guys. So, and I think Sean Williams is out the door eventually.
Oh, my man, Sean Williams. Love him. All right. Well, that covers the Bengals for y'all. Let's slide on down here to the Ravens. All right. Let's just start with the linebackers again. I see a trend here. We see 3 teams in the AFC North, 3 completely new linebacker cores for the most part. They had Patrick Oniswar, Chris Board, and Kenny Young last year, and that was an absolute dumpster fire. The fantasy production was not really there. Owning them felt like a nightmare. I had a couple of them, and it was just why is he still on my bench? Why is he still on my team? Hopefully they figured some of that out. They went and drafted Patrick Queen, and they drafted Malik Harrison. Both 2 guys that I wrote an article on Dynasty Nerds, I guess it was about 2 months ago. Both those guys were on my top 5 IDP players to keep an eye on coming into this draft class. And they both went to the same team. But like the 2 guys we just talked about before, Bates and Bell, I think there's going to be fantasy production from both these guys by default. The Ravens, they draft very well. They have a history of drafting well. They got Malik Harrison way cheaper than they probably should have. They took Patrick Queen, who a lot of people had kind of projected as one of their favorites as far as linebackers in this class. And we just got this quote the other day from Harbaugh that basically said they're both going to be playing. This is from a guy on Twitter, Jeff Zurabek. He writes for The Athletic over the Ravens, and he said, Harbaugh said, first-round rookie pick Patrick Queen will likely play Mike linebacker and be a 3-down guy. And they said Malik Harrison will likely play the weak side and also get some reps at Mike. And the exact quote is, we expect them to play a lot of football this year. We expect them. So I think they're both going to be top 45 linebackers. But because of the fact that he likes to pull guys and play around with things a little bit, I don't know if I buy that they're both going to immediately be in these roles, the first few weeks. So I'm a little hesitant to put them into my top 30 immediately, but I could see it. What do you guys think? We'll start with Jared. So I know Pat
me personally,
high on that rookie list.
He is high on my rookie list. And I think Malik Harrison is getting a ton of love all of a sudden. But most of it is because of him being from Ohio State. No hate against anybody from Ohio State, but name a top 10 linebacker from Ohio State. Yeah, you can give me safeties, you can give me defensive linemen. You can't give me linebackers. Okay, it's just a thing. Baker is the best one, I would say. In general, I'm not a huge Malik Harrison guy. I like Patrick Queen. I think if Patrick Queen plays in the middle, then he's going to be the guy. Their defensive lineman on the Ravens is ridiculous. Okay, they've even upgraded and adding Calais Campbell. So me personally, yes, Patrick Queen is shooting up charts. He's going to be high. He's a great guy. I don't think his coverage skills are as good as people want them to be, but he is a 4.5 guy. I mean, 4.5 flat 40 guys.
He can scoot.
He's not my number one, I'll tell you that.
Fair.
But I think that he has the opportunity to put up very good numbers as a rookie.
Yeah.
Especially with that defensive line in front of him.
So I've already mentioned I live here in Columbus and I've watched a lot of Ohio State football. I don't see Harrison being successful long-term like this. I feel like what he needs to do is put on another 10 or 15 pounds and become the heir apparent to Pernell McPhee. I think that will suit him a little bit better. He's a little bit stiff. I don't know that he's going to be somebody that you can count on in coverage. I think you're going to have to he's going to need to be a guy that plays around the line of scrimmage because I don't know that he changes directions very well. But if you can put him in, at 6'5", he should be able to bulk up a little bit from the 240s where he's at. And then he's got the speed to be able to rush the passer. And I think that's where he could be most successful. So, he might play a lot this year. I hesitate counting on a lot of production from him. There's some talk he'll play multiple positions. Well, it means he's got to learn multiple positions in an off season where they're not getting the practice time and the reps, and they're not getting the rookie camps. It's going to be challenging in my eyes for Harrison to put up reliable numbers. So I definitely would take Queen. I think he's the one that is going to be on the field until he shows that he can't cover from the middle linebacker position.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, Queen does have the higher draft capital, so it does make more sense that they're going to work harder to make sure he does stay out there longer. And yeah, I mean, like you said, Harrison might have a little bit more to prove to actually be in a role like that. But if he does get a role like that, it might be more production by default than it is production by talent, so to speak. So that's definitely a fair assessment. I liked Harrison when I watched him a bit. I mean, like you guys said, he's not great sideline to sideline, but he knows how to stop a dude in his tracks. I'll say that. I mean,
he's a big dude.
Yeah, he knows how to square up and just drop you. So that's a valuable skill set in a league where, especially in a division where you got Nick Chubb, James Conner running around, Joe Mixon. You're going to need a guy who's going to be able to you're not going to twist by me. You're not going to power through me. So I think that was a chess move by the Ravens to get both a great coverage linebacker and a big body guy who knows how to square up. So, and that was smart on them. They have a very well-built team, and they didn't necessarily take best player available as much as they built on what they have and tried to fix some spots that they were a little weak in. So my next guy we want to talk about on this team real quick is Matt Judon. Basically, for me, this is just a quick, we don't need to linger on him too long, but do you guys think his 2019 was a breakout season, or do you view it more as fool's gold and you are hesitant to return? And I'll just start and say I'm a little bit more on the side of it was fool's gold. I think a lot of things went very well for the Ravens across the board last year. I think the fact that there wasn't really anybody else at linebacker that was productive there helped him get some of these tackle numbers that he had, get his tackles for a loss maybe. I think he might have just really been more, he had 4 forced fumbles. That helps boost your score a little bit. He had a career high in sacks. That helps a little bit. But he's been there for 4 years now, and he's 27. So he'll be 28 this year. So, for me to draft a pass rushing linebacker like him on my team, when I look at his numbers, I see a guy that's on my team going to be a 4, maybe a 5. I don't want him to even necessarily be a guy I have to start every week. I'm opting on the side of fool's gold. I think that he's going to be a little bit of a disappointment if people are reaching for him this year. But what do you guys think? We'll start with Dennis this time. What do you think about Matt Judon?
Well, I think that his quarterback hits went up from career high in his first 3 years of 20 to 33. So he'd been relatively consistent, and then he had a big spike there.
Mm-hmm.
And he only converted those 13 extra quarterback hits into 1.5 sacks over his previous career high. I kind of agree with you. He's a bye week fill-in on a team that starts 3 linebackers. And if he starts to show some consistency, then maybe he bumps up to your linebacker 3 position. I don't know how many years you'll be able to count on it at 27 years old. The Ravens, they brought in 2 linebackers already last year, and so they're going to start to build. They've got guys that are older, like McPhee, like Judon at 27, and so they're going to have to start to build this team for the future. And they've shown their hand already by taking Queen and Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
So I think temper expectations. I don't know that I'd expect him to, go into double-digit sacks this year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably I'd be a little hesitant.
Yeah. What do you think, Jared? Fool's gold or potential late career breakout?
All right, so I was on the fool's gold thing. 100% with you. Let me tell you why I'm backing off a little bit. Okay, you bring in guys like Calais Campbell, who've been in the league, 14 years or something like that, who've been really consistent, who was the team captain in Jacksonville, but has back issues. I feel like they bring Calais Campbell more as a coach. Like, hey, we need you to coach up Judon to take over and be the guy in the long run. I'm telling you right now, I think Judon is a guy to keep. However, I think his tackle numbers drop severely in the long run because he goes to a defensive line position. And they brought in the 2 younger guys long term because they want them to be the guy. They want them to be their CJ Mosley, for the long term. But I don't know if I can see 33 quarterback hits again. So I'm kind of sticking with the fool's gold. I don't know. He's a guy like I'm with Dennis 100% on he's plugging.
Yeah.
So without pulling up the season's numbers, do you guys know offhand where that 33 quarterback hits lands? Is that a high number?
Yeah, that was top. I think. Like right now,
All
I
right.
think that was top 5 in the league. Let me double check. I've got it in a note here somewhere.
And I saw that and I was like, man, that feels really high to me. But
oh yeah, it was massive. All right, quarterback hit leaders,
really high.
2019. He had the 4th most. It was Shaq Barrett and Zadarius Smith both had 37. T.J. Watt had 36, who we're about to talk about, and then Matt Judon had 33. And he's sandwiched between Joey Bosa with 31 and T.J. Watt. So yeah, I mean, he kind of is the enigma there. He's the only guy in that group that didn't convert that to double-digit sacks. And I can read you the list. The guys after him: Joey Bosa, Marcus Golden, Chandler Jones, Nick Bosa, Cameron Jordan, Aaron Donald. Those are the next 4 or 5 guys, and they all converted to double-digit sacks. So you have to get down to number 11, Everson Griffin, and then 12, Calais Campbell. They had 24 quarterback hits, but they did not convert to double-digit sacks. So there is a discrepancy there for sure. It's worth noting. So let's not linger too long on him. You guys, we're kind of commentating. Make your own decision. Do you think he's fool's gold? And if you're a Ravens fan and you might be inclined to think this is the real deal, go get him. Have him on your team. So when it happens, you can tell all your league mates, I told you so. That's the best part about fantasy, is telling people I told you so when you beat them. So now we were going to talk about Calais Campbell, but I kind of want to scroll down a little bit and get through this. Jared mentioned it a little bit. He's older. He's an older guy, 33, almost 34, I think. They brought him in, and I still think he's got some gas in the tank. But like Jared said, he's one of those. He's a presence, not just on the field, but off the field, in the locker room, as a man, as a player. And again, the Ravens are an organization that does smart things. And to bring a guy like Calais Campbell in on a year when you're reloading your defense with young talent, I think that's a smart move, as much on the field as off the field. So let's talk about Chuck Clark real quick, and Earl Thomas, their defensive backs. Chuck Clark, for me, he's probably going to be a defensive back 2 or a defensive back 3. I'm not going out of my way to draft him, but I think that I believe he will have value this year. He kind of came on a little bit last year towards the middle of the season. He got a little hype, and he was, fairly consistent when he was on the field. But are you guys interested in going after anyone in this defensive back group? And I'll just go ahead and bring up Marlon Humphreys, Marcus Peters, and Tavon Young too, because if you're going to go with cornerbacks in your league, or if you do have to start a cornerback, or even a defensive back, these guys were all 3 highly productive the last 2 years. For the cornerback position, and they finished pretty highly among the defensive back position. I know Marlon Humphreys was in the top 24, I believe. That's including strong safeties and free safeties, and he's a corner. Marcus Peters, you can't count on picks, but if there was a player in the NFL you could count to get a pick, it's Marcus Peters, and he houses them too about 50% of the time. So if you're a big play guy,
he's a turnover monster, dude.
He is. He's a ball hawk, and he's not scared to get burned, but, he makes up for it when he takes it back 75 yards that one time and wins you a game. So let's just quickly, of this whole group, what are your guys' kind of thoughts? Let's start, Jared. What do you think about the defensive back group, and then Dennis, and then let's get to my Steelers.
So, with Chuck Clark, he had 73 tackles last year if he came on, a sack, 1 interception, which is well beyond what he did his first 2 years there combined. For me, obviously, I like Earl Thomas. I always have, but I'm sorry, he's just getting old, and he's at the point his injuries are gonna stack, and they stack 2 years in a row now. I love Marlon Humphrey. I love he's a dude. He don't care who you are. He comes at you, and that's why I like Marlon Humphrey. Him and OBJ had some straight fights. And then Mark Peters might be the best turnover margin player in the NFL. His rookie season, he had 9 interceptions, or sorry, some crazy interceptions.
Gaudy numbers. Just gaudy.
Yeah, gaudy numbers. The following year, same thing. He with
27 interceptions.
So
since 2015, 27.
That's crazy, dude. Crazy. Those are ridiculous numbers. When you're talking, I love him in the fact that, dude, he can read players, and he did in college. He got kicked off the team in college, went to Kansas City, blew up his rookie season, got suspended, still done off the next year. He's obviously a headache in the locker room. He's on his 3rd team and have 27 turnovers. He's got to be a headache in general. Let's be real here.
He has almost
if you're
almost 1,000 interception return yards, 797 to date. That's wild.
Peters is like the Brandon Cooks of defensive backs.
Yeah, like the Brandon Cooks of defensive backs. He's played 77 career games. He started 76. So that's a lot.
27 interceptions.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. So a third of the games he's gotten interceptions.
Yeah. So, And it's not like he's a bad defense corner either. Like, it's not like he can't play in coverage. It's not like he can't cover guys. It's not like he can't deflect passes. It's not like he can't get up there and, get physical with guys. It's just he plays with such finesse and with such high football IQ, he's able to take more risk and convert them into profitable plays. So, yeah, I think this is one of the most underrated groups just in general, defensive back wise. But as I say that, I said earlier, like I'm probably not necessarily going to have any of them on my team. So, Dennis, what do you think about them overall as a defensive back group before we move on?
So I peeked back real quick and looked at the Bengals numbers, and the safety numbers from the Bengals just are so much better than Earl Thomas and Chuck Clark. Now, Clark might be coming on, but at 73 total tackles, he's not producing the type of tackle numbers that Bates or Williams, or we're hoping Bell will. Now, if they play Bell a lot in Cincinnati, it might cause Bates and Williams numbers to go down, and then Clark will be more in line with their production. I do think Thomas, just his style of play over the years, and the injuries are starting to catch up with him. His off-field incident this season is going to go away. It's more of a joke than anything else to people not directly associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, to act like he's the first professional athlete to dabble with infidelity is ridiculous. He just got caught, and his wife put him in his place a little bit.
Yeah.
The challenge for me comes down to the cornerbacks. If you have to start a cornerback, you've got two exceptional cornerbacks. So if I'm attacking the Ravens as an offense, do I want to throw at Peters and Humphrey, given how good they are? I would much rather draft somebody like Greedy Williams, who's going to be across the field from Denzel Ward, and they're gonna pick on Williams, or find out which where's Eli Apple playing, because whoever is across from him is not going to get thrown at. Eli Apple's going to get thrown at, and if you have to start a cornerback, you want the guys that are getting thrown at. And so Peters and Humphrey, I don't think they're going to necessarily get the volume that's going to make you want to start them. You're going to have to hope that they get that interception return because offenses will generally avoid throwing at them.
100% agree. 100% agree. But on the flip side of that same coin is it's the Ravens, and they might not give any. You might not have a choice on. You have to throw, and that's kind of why we're gonna slide on down to the Steelers a little bit. That's one of the reasons I'm a little higher on Minka Fitzpatrick than a lot of people is. With Big Ben back, you don't have the option. Last year, teams just did not throw deep on the Steelers because Minkah was back there after that middle of the season area. His production dropped because they stopped targeting him like that. Well, when Big Ben's back out there and he's running it up, 21 points a game or plus, you won't have any choice but to go deep. It's the fourth quarter and you're down 2 scores. And but in a similar situation with the Ravens, when they're putting up numbers, you won't have any option but to throw. And one of those guys is going to be there unless they get injured. And you just better be a really accurate quarterback, and you better hope that your guys know what's going on out there, because these are some corners that know what's up. So let's move on to our final team. We're running a little long today, but I'm fine with that. I'm having a good time. I think we're having some good conversations here about some really unique, a really IDP-rich division. And let's get to maybe the best team of the whole group there. That's the Steelers. Linebackers, unlike the rest of these guys, they kind of have a situation figured out, and we know Devin Bush is going to be that starting middle linebacker. Steelers made a very rare trade last season to move up and get him. And it was the Devin White, Devin Bush. They both had very good seasons as rookies. And I'm a huge Devin Bush fan. I know some people are like, well, his production trailed off and they stopped playing him so much, yada, yada, yada. I mean, just believe in something, people. All right. You don't move up as an organization that doesn't move up to take a guy and think that just because one year he was a little bit, they didn't play him 100% of the time, doesn't mean that next year he's not going to get 100% of the snaps. Jared and I are huge Devin Bush fans. We've talked about him so much, it's unreal. We've stood up for him when other people were a little bit more hesitant. But what do you think about Devin Bush and his rookie season, and what do you think about him coming into this next year, Dennis?
Well, Vince Williams is getting up there in age. I don't even know if he's gonna how long he'll be able to hold on to that other inside backer position.
Mm-hmm.
Dupree has started to flourish a little bit on the outside there. And TJ Watt is, he does a fair amount of rushing the passer. If I'm looking for tackle production, it's clearly Devin Bush. He's going to be on the field. He gets to the quarterback a couple times, the occasional tackle for loss. He's not out there. You're not counting on him to make a ton of turnovers. He did have 4 fumble recoveries, but he only had 1 forced fumble, couple interceptions. But those 109 total tackles with 72 solos, I feel like that's his floor for this year. He's going to be out there. He's going to be playing. He's shown that he can be productive. And the Steelers are notorious for putting their players in positions to make plays. They have a outstanding defense. They run a great defense, and they're going to be just fine. If I can get Devin Bush, I'm going to get Devin Bush. He's definitely a guy that I'm okay reaching on a little bit.
Nice. Amen. Jared, anything to add about Devin Bush? I know we've talked about him a lot, but I just want to give you a shot if you want to give a little praise.
Well, obviously, I love Devin Bush. I think that he should have been the rookie defensive player through middle of the season last year. And obviously, he hit a wall to a point. Don't get me wrong. I get it, right? Nick Bosa came on strong. But with what Devin Bush did in the beginning, and Steve's going to have to look up snap counts for Devin Bush because he hit a wall at a point for me. But to have 9 tackles and 72 solo, when you've got a guy right behind you who had 71 solo and who I am super high on in Terrell Edmonds, and Dennis, the culture coach here, says his floor is 72, then he's got to be a top 10 linebacker. So I know he's in my list is our top 10 linebacker dynasty-wise. But if we're saying his floor is 109 and we're talking 150 on 145, that could be huge for the Steelers.
Yeah. Just got to get him to that ceiling. Another guy we briefly touched on, Bud Dupree, a moment ago. He's another guy that I had written in our notes here. Do you guys buy the Bud Dupree breakout? Same question as we had with Matt Judon. Was this fool's gold or was this the new normal for him? And just, he's 26 as well. He's pushing into that area. This is only his second year with double-digit quarterback hits, and he only had 17. He had 13 the year before. This was the first year he's gone over 6 sacks, and he almost doubled that. He had 11.5. He had almost 70 tackles. He's never gone over 42 before. So, I hate to be that guy. I'm a Steelers fan, but 4 forced fumbles, 3 pass deflections. I mean, these are all career numbers basically for him. And for me, for a guy that's been in a position to succeed like he has for as long as he has, to take this long to get there, I have concerns. I think we might be looking at another fool's gold situation. I'd be comfortable taking him as a 4 or a 5, but I'm a little worried about drafting him as anything else. What are your guys' thoughts on Bud Dupree? Fool's gold, or are you guys gonna dip back in this year, you think?
I drafted him in a dynasty league real late. Round 23, I think I drafted him, which I'm okay with because he's only had 5 years in the league. He had a great year last year. They obviously see something in him, and otherwise he would be gone because this is, became a contract thing for him. He signed a second round tender, so he's getting paid. And I think it's a make it or break it year for him.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah. I like him personally. I have him rostered for sure.
I mean, he's in a good situation. They've got a pretty good defensive line. He's got TJ Watt on the other side. So they can put him in positions to produce. I don't know that you necessarily look for him to put up, 100 tackles and 15 or 18 sacks, but to be consistent now that it just takes some time sometimes for it to click on a consistent basis. Mike Vrabel was a great example of a Steelers linebacker who just went in and he did a lot of the little things and learned the game. Then he went to New England and flourished. And I think sometimes Pittsburgh might, they look at what their reputation for developing wide receivers and their reputation for developing linebackers. At some point they go, well, we're just going to keep these guys instead of letting them go on that second contract now that we've developed them. Mm-hmm. And I think Dupree could be in that situation where if he comes out and puts up a 10 sack season with 65 tackles next year, I think they sign him to a 3 or 4 year deal. They want to keep him around. Is he going to put up TJ Watt kind of excitement? Probably not. But you want to have productive players on your team, and he's definitely that.
Yeah, definitely a good point.
The question is who do they depart from?
Come again?
Who do they depart from? I mean, you got Tuitt and Hayward, who are both standout guys. You definitely not getting rid of JJ Watt, who's going to be coming into a contract year, and pretty soon because it's his third year. So, this is going to be his third year.
This is fifth, I think. This will be his fourth year.
TJ?
Yeah, this will be his fourth year coming up. He came in the league in 2017.
Okay, yeah, you're right. His fourth year. This was his third year. So, so contract year with him, contract year with Bud Dupree because he signed a second-year tender. You got Tuitt and Cameron Hayward, who were studs, honestly.
Yeah.
Cameron Hayward is as good as, but the question is who's going to be the odd man out of here? Cameron Hayward's been in the league, 10 years? So I think it's 9 years maybe. He was drafted in 2011. But he's been a model of consistency. But he had his best year tackle last year with 83 combined tackles, which was by far his best year by 30 tackles. Yeah. So, which makes you wonder: are you as high on Cameron Hayward as you are on Bud Dupree because they have the same stats?
I am. Dennis brought up a good point. I agree with, the Steelers have developed him, and now that he's finally seems to be getting there, that you make a good point. You don't want to just hand him off to another team so that he can now, as a fully functional player, be successful. So the giving him the contract to see if he can do it again, that definitely makes sense. But Cameron Hayward, like you said, Jared, I mean, he led all defensive linemen in 2019 in tackles. He had his best year, 9 sacks. That's awesome. To go with 83 tackles tackles, that's awesome. 23 quarterback hits, and he's hit double digits many years. I mean, I'm looking at 6 years of double-digit quarterback hits for him. He's been an All-Pro. He's been in the Pro Bowl, and he's had 1 or 2 years where he didn't start every game, but he's pretty much plays almost every game. He gets you past deflections, which I love. Again, I said for defensive linemen, I'm always looking for those ways to get, 6, 10, 20 extra points in there. 6 pass deflections last year. He's had a 7 pass deflection year. He's 30 years old, but I think this year he could, I think it's another good year for him. I'm in on Cameron Hayward. Bud Dupree, I'm a little less excited about, but I think you guys both brought up good points. The production was there this year, so let's hold out some hope. Stephon Tuitt coming back. I didn't realize Stephon Tuitt's only 1 year older than TJ Watt. He was injured this last year, but he has, plays that interior defensive end in that 3-4. He's consistently had double-digit quarterback hits as well, so he gets in there. He's, averages basically 7-8 tackles for loss this season. That's some good production, so don't let him become the forgotten man on this team. But we're getting a little long here, so let's get to the big dogs. Let's talk about TJ Watt real quick. I tweeted something last night. I said, basically, in my opinion, TJ Watt should have been the defensive player of the year last year. 8 forced fumbles, 8 pass deflections, 2 interceptions, 14.5 sacks, 55 tackles, 36 quarterback hits, which is second top 10, as a linebacker, you should stop because, there's nothing in his rated players in the league. And I feel like last year would have been his huge breakout year if Big Ben would have been healthy and the Steelers would have been good. Because you take his numbers and you put them on a good team, he's defensive player of the year. I have the same feelings about Chandler Jones. They both had amazing seasons and they just kind of got screwed because their teams were just not that good. And most people were looking away instead of looking to them and to that team. So what are your guys' thoughts on TJ Watt? I mean, I think he has more on the bone. I think we didn't even see his ceiling yet. But what are your thoughts, Dennis?
Yeah, I think 14.5 sacks is a reasonable expectation. They're going to – he gets around the field and he makes plays. He's a high motor, all of those descriptors you want to give to a guy. He embodies that from his outside linebacker position. If he doesn't get to the quarterback and the quarterback gets the ball off, then he's running down the field chasing the play down. Mm-hmm. He's a hard worker. And he's shown that, even, we want to sometimes say, oh, well, he's going to be good because of JJ, the bloodlines went out. They don't play anywhere close to the same position. Mm-mm. And he's his own man. And to kind of use JJ, I think sells him short a little bit. He's had to develop a completely different set of skills and moves to play the position he does versus what JJ does at 6'6" and 290 or whatever. So
yeah. What do you think, Jared? I mean, TJ Watt, I mean, are we gonna? I know we've been on him since last year, but I mean, to me, he's still a top 10 linebacker, even in a tackle, in your bread and butter kind of leagues, just because he gets tackles too. I mean, his floor for tackles is 54. I mean, that's not bad if you're going to be able to throw, at least 8 sacks on there. So,
well, with IDP 1, 2, 3 scoring, you have the tackles for loss, you have the sacks, quarterback hits. TJ Watt is as good as they come. So, and people want to hate on this. I said his rookie season, JJ Watt is an afterthought to me in the long run. If you want to know who the better brother is, for me, right? People can love or hate it. One is injured all the time. One isn't. I've been on the TJ Watt bandwagon from the get, and I'm never going to go out after it. That dude is elite. And like you said, probably should have been the
defensive player of the year.
Maybe the defensive player of the year. Without a doubt, an all-pro. And the only other person that I think that should have got it that literally got no love is Shaq Barrett. So,
yeah,
and no love for that guy.
No.
So,
no love.
If you follow Ashley EMT on Twitter, she's giving Shaq a ton of love.
Good. Well, I'll have to go follow her after this because we're about that.
Yeah, we're about that life. So, overall, though, man, love TJ Watt, love Terrell Edmonds, love Stephon Tuitt, Cameron Hayward, Bud Dupree, you name it. The Steelers' IDP relevancy is awesome.
Through the roof. Yeah. All right, let's touch on these back. Let's talk on these defensive backs real quick. Terrell Edmonds, like you said, quietly with 105 tackles last season. Quietly a first-round pick 2 years ago. Quietly on one of the best defenses in the league. The Steelers, there's disruption there. He's a cheap asset to me because there's so many everybody we just talked about. We almost forgot to talk about Terrell Edmonds because of all the other things happening on this field. And then you've got him back there, like you said, getting no love and getting production. So Terrell Edmonds to me,
100 tackles.
I know. And he's just like, he's hard. No one ever talks about him. Poor guy. They talk about his brother more than him, but his brother's a beast too. So
I think the challenge you run into with Terrell Edmonds is that his game is just tackles.
Yeah.
He's not producing turnovers. He's not getting quarterback hits and sacks. So in leagues that value tackles, Terrell Edmonds is at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to, if he can, get a little more to his game, I think then it becomes then he starts getting talked about. But for him, it is about tackles.
Yeah, agreed. And he, like you said, he doesn't do much else, but that means there's definitely some room for improvement. And on that defense, with so much disruption, I think this year could be the year we see that shift a little, where he does get a couple of these more big plays, maybe a fumble recovery touchdown. Maybe he knocks a couple of his own forced fumbles. Maybe he brings up his pass deflections into that 8-9 area. That would be cool. So let's talk about Minka Fitzpatrick real quick. We're going to end the show on Minka Fitzpatrick. He's probably the most polarizing player to talk about in IDP, because you have two camps on Minka Fitzpatrick, basically. You have he's just a big play guy, and I've seen that take a lot. Without his interceptions, he's nothing. Well, I put a tweet out on yesterday, a poll out the other day, and I said, if a defensive back averaged 75 tackles a season, would that be valuable to your IDP team? Would that be a valuable IDP asset? 80 or 90% of people said yes. There was a handful that said no. That's what Minka Fitzpatrick is averaged through his first 2 years in the league, 75 tackles. But the crazy thing about that is, as a rookie, he didn't even start 16. He started 11. Like, they did not put him on the field constantly. So he was fighting an uphill battle, being put in a position not to succeed. And he was relevant. He had 80 tackles. Last year, he switched his teams even. He had 69 tackles. He had 5 interceptions, 9 pass deflections each of the past 2 years. And, and 75 tackles. To have that as a baseline on a player, 75 tackles, and to know without a shadow of a doubt that he's going to be involved in some big plays, given the defense he's on, and just his skill set. You don't have 7 interceptions through your first 2 years on accident. You don't have 2 forced fumbles last year on accident. You don't have 75 tackles a season on accident. Sure, he doesn't get behind the line of scrimmage. Sure, he doesn't play in the box. But like we said earlier, with Big Ben coming back, teams aren't going to have a choice but to throw on the Steelers this year. And who's back there? Minka Fitzpatrick's back there. And in the fourth quarter, I think you're going to see it like we saw it last year. He's going to shut some games down with his interception ability, with his pass breakup ability. And it's just wild to me that there are people that think that he is not a good IDP asset. Like, literally, I've seen people quote, he is not good for IDP. I just don't see it. 75 tackles, big play ability. What are your guys' thoughts? And I just for comparison real quick, the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, who does play in the box, who everybody loves, who is, if you say his name, a good IDP asset. He averages like 76, 78 tackles a season. Like, there's not much difference. His are a lot more on the solo aspect, but that's because he's playing strong safety and not free safety. But, I mean, the numbers are comparable, and you don't ever hear any IDP slander of Tyrann Mathieu. And you hear a lot of IDP slander.
Love or hate Minka Fitzpatrick. He had 51 solo tackles his rookie season. He had, 45 last year. He was a perennial All-Pro, a first-team All-Pro, with 5 interceptions. I know he had a touchdown, right? Am I wrong about that?
No, he did. You're right. So,
if I can add all those points and you look at that, and if you say Tyrann Mathieu is a great IDP asset, for me, I'm love or hate it, I'm taking Minka over him in a lot of leagues because I'm getting the same player with higher upside. So I love Minka Fitzpatrick. And we're talking about Tyrann Mathieu's on his, third team, fourth team? So I get Minka's on his second team, but because they can't afford him, right? Yeah. Miami just wasn't going to afford him. And they got a lot of that. I mean, they got a lot for him. Let's be real here. The Steelers got, 4 All-Pros on their team?
Oh, so, at least.
And maybe defense. 5 to be – so they were the number 1 team last year, selected All-Pro and first-team All-Pros roles. So love Minka Fitzpatrick, love Terrell Edmonds, Devin Bush, Tuitt, and Hayward, and of course our man TJ Watt. So
what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts, Dennis, on Minkah? Like, I don't know if you're deep into the IDP scene, but there are people that, don't even rank him in their top 30 at safety, which is wild to me.
I think people that are ranking Minkah low are they're aiming for 100 tackle plus players. If I were a betting man, he's got 7 interceptions in his first 2 years, couple forced fumble recoveries. So to just discount him, I would like to see a little more production outside of the tackles. If he's gonna only provide 60, 80 tackles in that range, you would like to see a little more in the turnover / quarterback hit. But when I look at Pittsburgh traded the 18th pick for him, and looking at the safeties that went in this draft, McKinney and Duggar went at pick 36 and 37 in the second round, and neither one of them have proved anything yet. So I feel like if I'm Pittsburgh and I'm looking at Fitzpatrick, and he's 23 years old, 22 last year, coming off an 80 tackle season, I can put him at my free safety spot. He's got the speed, and he fits our defense much better than any of the defensive backs that they were going to get in this year's draft. Big Ben coming back this year, depends on my mood. Honestly, some days I think, man, it's going to be great for everybody. And other days I'm like, well, we really haven't seen him throw. And we've watched some of these quarterbacks come out after being injured, and they don't have any zip.
Yeah, true. I just wanted to give a little Minka Fitzpatrick love. I mean, again, like in the community, he's kind of gets dumped on a lot. And, some people say he's drafted too high. I went back and looked at all my dynasty drafts that I've done this year just to see where Minkah was taken. He was taken defensive back 17 in one, defensive back 6 in another, DB 16, DB 14, and then DB 6. So, I mean, that makes his ADP right around, he's most people's first defensive back too. And for a guy that has the big playability that he has and is going to get me 75 tackles, I love him. And I don't understand the hate for him. People like he only has interceptions. So I'm like, can you not look at the other things that he does, because they're there. I mean, if you choose not to look at them, that's on you. And if you want to dump on him, I mean, I guess that's fine. But to me, I mean, he's my quintessential defensive back too. 75 tackles and a handful of big plays and week winning upside. Him and Tyrann Mathieu, hand in hand. I love both of them, and I just wanted to bring that up. We have run for an hour and 28 minutes. This will go down as probably our second longest pod ever. Let's bring old man Steve in here.
What's up, guys?
Not much.
So
how we do, Steve?
What up, Steve?
Did great. I was looking at Devin Bush's snap counts there. He started off the season with 53, which was 75.7%, 62, 79.5%, 79, 100%, 66, 100%. Then he went to 72, which was 91.1%, and 55, 88.7%, 57, 95%, 66, 94.3%, and then he hit a wall. 34 snaps, 45.3%, 54, 77.1%, 35 was 61.4%. Then he started playing a bit more. 49 was 74.2%. You get the gist.
So he was on and off the field. Early he was on a little more, took a dip, and then came back on.
Yep.
I don't think that's going to be an issue this upcoming year. I think that he should probably be out there a good bit.
Played a total of 889 snaps.
109 tackles on that many snaps. That's good. That's a good tackle rate.
Mm-hmm.
So any other?
So right around 72% total.
Yeah, I think it was just a hair over that maybe. But how we do anything else? Fact checking for us there? Did we miss anything or misstate anything, or did we do pretty good today?
No, I know that we were talking about who was it? The cornerback hit 210. Who was it?
Corner was
211 tackles.
210 interception yards.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
Peters.
Yeah, Peters. That's right.
Marcus Peters.
Yeah,
Just-
210 interception yards in 2019.
Whew. Dang.
I
That's
know.
basically as many yards as John Ross had.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well,
Dang.
if there's any more comments you guys got, I'm good on the day. It was a great show, Dennis. We appreciate you coming over. Real quick shout out, Expand the Box Score. Obviously, they are our podcast hosts. There where we look at our data. We love them. Shout out Dynasty Nerds. Dennis is my editor / my boss, so I kept the cursing to a minimum today. I want to put on, a good face. You guys need to go check out Dynasty Nerds. Our IDP team over there is getting bigger. We got some guys dropping some heat over there, so I got to step my game up a little bit. Shout out to the whole crew over there. But Dennis, we really do appreciate you coming on with us, man. It was fun.
I'm happy to anytime.
Yeah, hopefully we can have you back on sometime in the near future. I love that you embrace IDP. You embrace all aspects of fantasy football. And as more people like that, that are into the offensive side, dip into the defensive side, and this conversation becomes a larger part of the fantasy football conversation. The content's going to get better. The people will come, like they said in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. So we're doing our part to build it. So we appreciate you. You know where to find us on all of the social medias. So that's all from me. Dennis, Steve, Jared, whatever you guys got to say, and then let's let Jared close us out like he does.
Hey, all I got to say is if you're not playing IDP, you're only playing half the game.
Right on.
Truth. All right, Jared, give him the heat.
All right. Well, until next week in our next episode, let's go, let's go, let's go.